Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio from Monday, July 18, 2022. White House and Senate Republicans reacting to Democratic Senator Joe Manchin's putting the brakes on climate, energy, and tax provisions of a Democratic social spending proposal. He says due to high inflation, leaving the package to be only about health care. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announcing votes on the scaled-back version of the bill to increase U.S. competitiveness with China, focusing only on computer chips, will take place this week. Senator Chris Murphy, leading Democratic advocate for more strict gun control, discusses the report released this week about the mass shooting at the elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and what it says about his efforts to ban assault rifles. Vice President Kamala Harris at the NAACP convention comparing the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade, the decision about abortion, to slavery. And the White House asked about Saudi Arabia's claims that President Biden did not confront the Crown Prince about the 2018 murder of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And we start with the Senate back in session today. Since Friday's announcement from Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, that the latest inflation report, 9.1% in June year over year, he says means he will not support any climate provisions or tax reform in the budget reconciliation package that he had been negotiating with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York. Democrats need every one of their 50 Senate caucus members to vote yes to pass anything using this procedure. Republicans can't filibuster it, but assuming all 50 Republicans in the Senate vote no, it would be 50-50, and Vice President Kamala Harris, a Democrat, could break the tie in the Democrats' favor. Senator Joe Manchin on West Virginia Metro News program Talkline explained his position on Friday.
I said, Chuck, until we see the July inflation figures, until we see the July Federal Reserve rates, interest rates, then let's wait until that comes out so we know that we're going down a path that won't be inflammatory to add more to inflation. Inflation is absolutely killing many, many people. They can't buy gasoline. They have a hard time buying groceries. Everything they buy and consume for their daily lives is a hardship to them. And can't we wait to make sure that we do nothing to add to that? And I can't make that decision on taxes of any type and also on the energy and climate because it takes the taxes to pay for the investment in the clean technology that I'm in favor of. But I'm not going to do something and overreach that causes more problems.
So I want to get, and I want to get into the specifics here, but this is being portrayed by that you blew up the talks, but you did not blow up these talks.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, we've had good, absolute conversations. We've had good negotiations. We've been talking our staffs have been working diligently for the last 2 to 3 months, looking at a way. Hoppy, first of all, there's no human being that put themselves through this if they weren't sincere about trying to make things better for our country. And I know people have a hard time believing that because everything is politics. My main goal is what's good for my country. I'm not worried about what's good for the Democrat or Republican Party. They're going to do just fine. Bottom line is American people are getting short-sighted because of the political timetables and the political gesturing going on.
Senator Joe Manchin on Friday with radio talk show host Hoppy Kercheval in their home state of West Virginia. After the announcement by Senator Manchin, President Biden did put out a statement asking the Senate to pass a narrow bill that would, quote, give Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices and to prevent an increase in health insurance premiums for millions of families, and to do it before the August recess. The president promising to address climate and clean energy through executive action. At the White House today, Jared Bernstein, a member of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, asked how the president would do that and why the president was not able to convince Senator Manchin to pass those provisions now.
Thanks. Jared, you said over the weekend that the president is going to look to enact his climate agenda with or without Congress. But realistically, how much of it can he enact without Congress, especially now that the Supreme Court has tied his hands to some degree when it comes to emissions regulations at the EPA?
I think realistically, there is a lot he can do, and there is a lot he will do. The president will aggressively fight to attack climate change because he knows it's one of the reasons he's here, and it is absolutely core to transitioning from where we are to where we need to be. Now, I think I've given you a fulsome sense today of that both of the sides of that transition are important. Affordability at the pump, yes, but we also have to plot a path to clean energy. I said over the weekend that it's kind of unfathomable to me that that one wouldn't appreciate this urgency. If you look at the costs to our economy of floods, of droughts, of fires, if you look at the global economy and you see the kinds of heat waves that are occurring right now, scientists will tell you all day that this very much relates to global warming. You're talking about something like $120 billion a year in cost to our economy. If you think about the geopolitical costs occurring when a Russian plutocrat weaponizes energy and fossil fuels and funds this unjust aggression against Ukraine with it, you get another sense of just how important it is to intervene. And this all comes from conversations we've had with the president. That's how urgent this is. Now, you asked what can he do. Let me start by telling you a little bit about what he has done. He has taken unprecedented action already to tackle the climate crisis. He's invoked and this is non-legislative, he's invoked the Defense Production Act to make more clean energy in America. He's jump-started the offshore wind industry. He has set the strongest emissions standards ever. And it is our firm belief that he can and will continue to do so if the legislative path is closed to him. But he will also pursue that path as well. And that this is how important and urgent it is to him.
So then why do you think that, you just laid out the costs of inaction. Clearly, Senator Manchin believed that the cost of action was too high in the face of high inflation. Why do you think you weren't able to convince him that the cost of doing nothing would be higher?
I just don't have a great answer to that question. I mean, I think what we can do, and I hope I've been a little bit convincing here in my conversation, but I've worked for Joe Biden for a long time, and I found him to be profoundly convincing in this area. And he's someone who's been in the Senate for decades, so it's not like he grew up in a world where climate change and global warming were the top of the agenda, but his understanding of that, his a deep appreciation of the urgency of what I've just described of you is as high as I've been stressing in my comments today. So I find, I personally, and I think lots of other people, or 81 million people who voted for him, find him extremely convincing on this. And when he says, when Fighting Joe Biden says he's going to keep fighting for this issue, I think we should all believe him.
That's Jared Bernstein, a member of the Council of Economic Advisors, with reporters in the White House briefing room. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, has been opposed to what the Democrats have been offering as a social spending and tax reform plan, commonly called Build Back Better, especially the early versions that totaled several $1 trillion. Today, Senator McConnell taking aim at what's left, one of the health care provisions.
One of the things Washington Democrats appear most eager to do with their one-party control of government is to resurrect their war on America's world-leading medical innovation sector. In a statement just last week, President Biden praised fellow Democrats for having, quote, beaten back, end quote, the industry behind most of the world's life-saving treatments and cures. And as things stand right now, it appears our colleagues intend to work from a familiar left-wing playbook in the coming weeks. Washington Democrats are working right now to find ways to put more bureaucracy between American patients and the treatments they rely on. They want to put socialist price controls between American innovators and new cures for debilitating diseases. With one-party Democrat control of government, they just might get away with it. But our colleagues need to think again. Even just the medicine-related parts of their partisan plans would have hugely negative consequences for our country. The American people know that government can't magically make things cost less by passing laws saying things should cost less. There's no Washington magic wand, trust me, or else we'd have every American driving $1 pickup trucks and eating $1 steaks just by passing a law setting those prices at $1. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The bill for made-up price controls always comes due. In this case, the invoice will be delivered to the American people who are living with actual health challenges. The price of bigger government will be fewer life-saving cures, less innovation in the future. Let's face it, prescription treatments are expensive to produce. Long-term investments in cutting-edge research and development require certainty. What Washington Democrats want to do right now would bleed hundreds of billions of dollars in potential R&D out of American industry, shrinking the pipeline for new therapeutics for patients with chronic conditions, pouring cold water on the next breakthroughs in the fight against Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
The Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor. C-SPAN spoke with Roll Call's chief correspondent Niels Lesniewski about what Senator Joe Manchin's demands, and that is no climate provisions and no tax provisions, no clean energy provisions, but only the health care provisions in the Build Back Better plan, what that means for the president's domestic agenda.
Manchin's most recent claims have, he has said that he sort of pulled back from the bargaining table this most recent time because of inflation concerns. Remember, there was the report last week of the 9% plus inflation. He wants to see what happens in the next inflation report, which should come out in the middle of August. But of course, that means that if the Democrats were to wait for Manchin to read the next inflation numbers, you really wouldn't see this move until after Labor Day. So what it appears is happening, thanks in large part to President Biden deciding that this was the approach he wants taken, is that they're just going to move ahead with what Manchin seems to be willing to go along with for the moment, which is some healthcare provisions, efforts to extend benefits, expanded benefits under the Affordable Care Act, under Obamacare, that were sort of largely came about because of the pandemic. And so I think that what we're looking at here is a narrower effort, but always with the senator from West Virginia. You never know quite what the questions he is going to ask are going to be, and this inflation report certainly changed his calculation.
Niels Lesniewski is chief correspondent for Roll Call, joining C-SPAN on Monday morning's Washington Journal. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, in his opening remarks on the Senate floor did not mention anything about Senator Joe Manchin and the Build Back Better agenda and what's taken place. But Senator Schumer did announce that votes on another economic bill will be taking place this week. It concerns computer chip production.
And most importantly, the United States Senate must finish work on one of the most urgent priorities facing this chamber, addressing the chip shortage that is hurting American consumers, decimating our supply chains, and endangering our national security. For the information of all, tomorrow we're going to hold the first procedural vote on legislation to address these critical issues, which both sides have been working on for months. As we speak, Democrats and Republicans are hashing out the final details on a bill so we can move forward this week. The chip shortage is not some abstract issue. It's impacting the daily lives of millions of Americans. Cars, refrigerators, and other household appliances require chips to function. But supply shortages mean prices have gone up and up and up for those goods, and Americans have to wait months to just get hold of them. If you want to help with inflation and get it down, this bill is an important bill to vote for. And we can take a giant step towards fixing this problem if we act now. Last week, the Secretaries of Commerce and Defense told us plainly that, quote, our economic and national security depends on our ability to invest in the technologies of today and tomorrow. So again, we need to move quickly. Right now, some of the most important manufacturers in our country are weighing whether to make their investments where to make their investments in semiconductor production. Many of them are holding off on final decisions to see what Congress does, but they're not going to wait around forever. As one company told the Wall Street Journal, without these incentives from Congress, the capital investment required for expanding production is not economically viable in the United States, given other global alternatives. Other countries have copied our legislation, and they're offering companies huge amounts of money to locate there. And that, of course, will endanger our security, economic and national. The message is not subtle. If countries do not think it's profitable to make chips here in America, they're going to go somewhere else. Countless of good-paying American jobs are on the line. Billions of dollars of economic activity are on the line. And as I said, our national security is at stake. For these reasons, I urge my colleagues to move forward tomorrow. Of course, as we work on CHIPS legislation this week, I urge my colleagues on the conference committee to continue finalizing the larger jobs and innovation package that both sides have been working on for months. I want to see this chamber send a compromise bill to the President's desk because this is so important for the future of our country and for our national security. I've worked for more than a year with Republicans to get the competition and innovation bill done, so I strongly support my colleagues as they keep working. In the meantime, we must take steps to get CHIPS done as soon as we can.
Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, the majority leader on the Senate floor. Returning to the Senate, by the way, after being in isolation for a number of days following a positive COVID-19 test, he says he's fully recovered. Wall Street today, the Dow down 215, NASDAQ down 52, S&P down 32. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, the chief negotiator on the Democratic side of the recent bipartisan bill to confront gun violence, commenting today about the Texas Legislative Committee's report released on Sunday about the Uvalde, Texas elementary school mass shooting, which a single gunman killed 19 students and 2 teachers. The report finds, as the Austin Statesman American writes, systemic failures and egregious poor decision-making, including school officials who failed to follow established safety plans and responding law enforcement who failed to follow their training for active shooter situations and delayed confronting the gunman for more than an hour. The report said of law officers, they failed to prioritize saving the lives of innocent victims over their own safety. Senator Chris Murphy making his remarks today as part of a virtual discussion about gun violence. The question was whether AR-15 style rifles should be banned.
It used to be that half of American homes had a firearm. Today, that number is down somewhere in the mid 30%. And so the gun industry decided that the way that they were going to make money with a declining share of American households buying guns was to sell more expensive, more highly profitable weapons. And so the gun industry decided that they were going to start selling these AR-15s or AR-15 style weapons, which come with much higher profit margins for them, and that they were going to build a case that access to these weapons was sort of wrapped up in your sense of Americanism and your sense of access to American values like liberty and freedom. That's nonsense, but that argument has worked in many parts of the country. There is a belief that many Americans have that you are robbing them of their national heritage if you have any limitation on the kind of lethal firearms that are available to them. And so, but we know that so long as these assailants are better armed than law enforcement, there's very little you can do to stop them. Listen, I can't justify or rationalize what those police officers did in the Uvalde classroom. They should have rushed that shooter. But at some level, you can understand law enforcement's reticence to walk into a classroom when the shooter is as well armed or better armed than they are. And we shouldn't accept that in a civilized society. But do remember, there are parts of this bill, though not banning assault weapons, do allow us to take assault weapons away from dangerous people. We fund red flag laws in this bill, which is the process by which states take these weapons away from dangerous individuals. We've created a new waiting period for younger buyers. that I argue may have actually prevented both the Highland Park shooting and the Uvalde shooting. When young people are trying to buy assault weapons during their moment of crisis. So agreed that we have a lot more to do, but there are provisions of the bill we passed that may end up taking away assault weapons from dangerous individuals or preventing those individuals from buying the assault weapon in the first place.
Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, part of a virtual discussion today hosted by the Center for American Progress on gun violence prevention. Politico reports that the House Judiciary Committee will be taking up an assault weapons ban bill this week, sponsored by Congressman David Cicilline, Democrat from Rhode Island. That's going to be on Tuesday. They write it's a proposal that hasn't seen serious consideration in decades and that floor action is expected before August, but proposal is doomed in the Senate. Congressman Ronnie Jackson, Republican from Texas, tweeting on Sunday a video of himself holding two AR-15 style rifles, challenging President Biden to try to take them from him.
Hey everybody, this is Congressman Ronnie Jackson from the great state of Texas. I have a message for the Biden administration. If you're thinking about taking our ARs, you can start here in Texas. On behalf of all the law-abiding gun owners in the state of Texas, I just want to say, come and get it.
Congressman Ronnie Jackson's tweet this past weekend at Newsweek says it's been viewed over 1 million times. Associated Press in Buffalo, New York has this: the white gunman charged with killing 10 black people in a racist mass shooting at a Buffalo supermarket pleaded not guilty Monday to federal hate crime charges that could be punishable by the death penalty. Peyton Gendron was indicted last week on hate crimes and weapons counts. The plea was entered in court by his attorney, who said she hoped to resolve the case before trial. The House Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer, Democrat from Maryland, says the House will vote this week on a bill to protect access to contraceptives, and soon will be voting on a bill dealing with the right to same-sex marriage. House Democrats last week passed bills guaranteeing access to abortion. This all follows the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs, the case that overturned the Roe v. Wade constitutional right to abortion. And now with these extra bills, they are looking at Justice Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion, in which he says the Supreme Court should reconsider its past rulings codifying rights to contraception access, same-sex relationships, and same-sex marriage. Some House Democrats want to go further and expand the court by 4 seats. A news conference today on the U.S. Capitol grounds, including Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Democrat from New Jersey.
Some might think what we're proposing is extreme. I think that it is reasonable, reflective, and responsive, because the moment that we're in right now is extreme. It is extremely dangerous to our democracy and to our privacy and to our rights. So we must use every single solitary tool that we can imagine to do something about this. And expanding the court is one of those. Holding justices accountable for voting on cases that they had no business voting on, figuring that out is another. Holding justices accountable who lied during questioning before the Senate, that is another thing that we need to look at. This is the time when all good women and men must come to the aid of this country. And in so doing, we must preserve democracy, preserve our planet, and we must employ every single solitary tool that would be at our disposal. We, the people, are who this government is all about. And when we, the people, collectively, consistently, persistently demonstrate, vote, act, talk, call, write, text, bug, then we, the people, will make changes happen for the people.
Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Democrat from New Jersey, part of a news conference today on Capitol Hill on the outside, on the grounds of the Capitol, with other House Democrats proposing this bill to expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats. The Supreme Court ruled in 2015 that same-sex marriage is a constitutional right. The case was Obergefell v. Hodges. Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, saying on his podcast over the weekend that he agrees with Justice Clarence Thomas that decision should be revisited.
Obergefell, like Roe versus Wade, ignored 2 centuries of our nation's history. Marriage was always an issue that was left to the states. We saw states before Obergefell that were moving. Some states were moving to allow gay marriage. Other states were moving to allow civil partnerships. There were different standards that the states were adopting. And had the court not ruled in Obergefell, the democratic process would have continued to operate, that if you believed gay marriage was a good idea, the way the Constitution set up for you to advance that position is convince your fellow citizens. And if you succeeded in convincing your fellow citizens, then your state would change the laws to reflect those views. In Obergefell, the court said, no, we know better than you guys do, and now every state must sanction and permit gay marriage. I think that decision was clearly wrong when it was decided. It was the court overreaching. Whether the court will reverse it, I will say, so in Dobbs, what the Supreme Court said is Roe is different because it's the only one of the cases that involves the taking of a human life, and that's qualitatively different. I agree with that proposition.
Senator Ted Cruz, Republican from Texas, on his podcast titled Verdict on Saturday. Vice President Kamala Harris talking today about the Supreme Court and its decision to overturn the constitutional right to abortion. Vice President comparing it to slavery, part of her speech at the NAACP annual convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
We know, NAACP, that our country has a history of claiming ownership over human bodies, and today, extremist so-called leaders are criminalizing doctors and punishing women for making health care decisions for themselves. Personal decisions that is her right to make in consultation with her doctor, her pastor, her priest, her rabbi, her loved ones, not her government telling her what to do. And these so-called leaders, so-called, claim that, well, you know, we just think that this is a decision that should be made by the folks in the states. People in the states can vote on this, right? But at this moment, many of those same so-called leaders are the same ones who are passing laws to restrict the ability of people to vote. Laws, they're passing laws, the same people. Laws that ban drop boxes and restrict early voting. Laws that make it illegal to give people food and water for waiting in line to vote. Undemocratic laws, un-American laws. You know, I asked my team to remember Venn diagrams, those three circles, right? And then let's just see where they overlap. So I asked my team, I said, you know, do a Venn diagram on two circles for me, and in particular, the overlap of states that are attacking the freedom to vote and attacking women's freedoms over their own bodies. There are 10 states that are doing both. Here's the point. Our freedoms are all connected.
Vice President Kamala Harris at the 113th NAACP annual convention in Atlantic City, New Jersey today. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live, Tuesday, on C-SPAN Radio at 10 a.m. Eastern, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg gives an update on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was signed last year, testifying before the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. That's live, Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on your smart speaker. Say, play C-SPAN Radio.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile video app and wherever you get your podcasts. A few more headlines. Dr. Anthony Fauci, President Biden's chief medical advisor, says in an interview with Politico that he plans to retire by the end of the president's term in office. Fauci has led the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. About COVID-19, he says, we're in a pattern now. If somebody says you'll leave when we don't have COVID anymore, then I will be 105. I think we're going to be living with this. An Interior Department saying that Secretary Deb Haaland broke her leg on Sunday while hiking in the Shenandoah National Park and that she's working virtually. The department says she's grateful to park staff, the U.S. Park Police, and the team at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center for their excellent care. President Joe Biden back at the White House after his trip to the Middle East, which included a stop in Saudi Arabia and a meeting with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The president says that he confronted MBS, as he's known, about the murder in 2018 of Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi. U.S. intelligence says MBS ordered that killing. But the Saudi foreign minister saying over the weekend he did not hear President Biden blame MBS during the meeting. Returning to the White House this weekend, the president asked whether the foreign minister was telling the truth. The president said no. Follow-up questions today to the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Does the president, now that he's back from Saudi Arabia, does the president still believe that Saudi Arabia and the Crown Prince should be considered a pariah, or did this trip change his view about that?
So as you heard from the president again on Friday, he made very clear that he made his views very clear to the Crown Prince on that during that bilat meeting, and he even said it would be inconsistent, right, for a president of the United States not to speak of our values, not to talk about human rights, and it would be inconsistent, to be quite frank, of Joe Biden not to do that. So he was very clear about where he stood about Jamal Khashoggi's death and murder. He mentioned it from the start of their meeting, and when it comes to his comments stand. He has been pretty clear about that, about where he stands on the comments that he made during the campaign. And look, I think one of the other things I do want to be very clear about is, if we're going to talk about human rights, if we're going to talk about our values, he believes it's important to have that straightforward leader-to-leader conversation. The president has talked about that many times, about how important it is to talk directly and frankly with leaders when it comes to our values, when it comes to issues like human rights, and he will continue to have those conversations.
And yet the Saudis say that conversation about Khashoggi never happened. The foreign minister says he was there and he didn't hear the president confront MBS in that way. So are they lying about that? And if so, does that indicate that actually they are not getting the message?
So I'll say this: the president was asked this question, and he spoke to it directly. And I do believe that if anyone telling you differently about what the president said, they weren't listening to the president himself when he was asked that question, when he spoke about how he brought up the death of Jamal Khashoggi. So I'll leave it to what the president said when he was asked directly most recently about that.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre taking reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. This from Associated Press. The United States on Monday said it had not sought the arrest of the former lawyer of slain Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, contradicting the United Arab Emirates' official explanation for the American citizen's detention. The UAE on Saturday sentenced the civil rights lawyer, U.S. citizen Asim Ghafoor, to 3 years in prison followed by deportation on charges of money laundering and tax evasion. Ghafoor has rejected the charges and said he had no idea he had been convicted on the charges at some point in the past in absentia. This came up at today's State Department briefing with spokesperson Ned Price.
Ask about this American citizen detained in UAE over the weekend. Rights groups basically say he was detained for political reasons. He is linked with Khashoggi. Does the U.S. share that assessment, and what exactly are you guys doing with the Emiratis to, try to bring him home or, seek a fair trial?
Well, Humayra, we've been actively and closely engaged on this case ever since we learned of it shortly after his detention late last week. We've raised his detention with senior levels of the Emirati government. We have requested additional information from our Emirati partners, and we're watching this case closely, and we're providing appropriate consular support. In fact, consular officers from our embassy on the ground visited Mr. Ghafour on July 15th. They again visited him on July 17th. Embassy officials also observed his virtual hearing today on July 18th. We have conveyed our expectations to our Emirati partners that Mr. Ghafour receive continued consular access, that he be afforded a fair and transparent legal process, and that he be treated humanely. You asked about the basis for his detention and the charges against him. Of course, we would refer you to Emirati authorities to speak to that. But what I can say is that we've seen no indication at this point that his detention has anything to do with his association with Jamal Khashoggi. But we are still gathering information. Again, as I said, we've raised this case at senior levels, and we are doing everything we can to ensure that Mr. Ghafour is treated fairly and humanely.
State Department spokesman Ned Price at today's briefing. First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, the wife of the President, Volodymyr Zelensky, will speak to the U.S. Congress, according to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office, scheduled for Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. C-SPAN will cover it. This comes as Russia's war against Ukraine continues, and today the Russian defense minister telling troops in central and southern command groups to step up their operations, quote, in all directions. One of the Western nations' response to the Russian invasion has been to invite Finland and Sweden to join NATO, and today the U.S. House of Representatives passing a resolution in support of the U.S. Senate and the other 29 current NATO members ratifying the two new entries. From the House floor, here's Congressman Jim Costa, Democrat from California.
I rise today in support of Chairman Keating's resolution expressing support for the sovereign decision of Finland and Sweden to apply for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO, and calling on all members of NATO to swiftly ratify the protocols of accession. Since Russia's invasion in February of this year on Ukraine, the world has changed. The attack on the Ukraine has been watched as Vladimir Putin ordered his military to march through Ukraine, brutally attacking civilians and civilian infrastructure. It's exceptionally clear that his senseless aspirations, imperial aspirations, go far beyond the Donbass and even the Ukraine in its entirety. As a matter of fact, he has stated such. In response to our transatlantic allies and partners have had completely to rethink, as is clear, the security postures and tighten our ranks to counter global challenges.
Congressman Jim Costa, Democrat from California, on the House floor. Also supporting this resolution, Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio.
Vladimir Putin launched his unprovoked war of aggression against Ukraine and the inhumane assault on innocent civilians, thinking that he would be able to divide the NATO alliance. He was mistaken. Instead, Finland and Sweden responded by dropping their policies of military neutrality and applying for NATO membership. As NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg put it, Vladimir Putin wanted less NATO, and now he's getting more NATO on his borders. Finland and Sweden will both be significant security providers for NATO. This bipartisan resolution supports ratifying the accession of Sweden and Finland to NATO. Having served as the president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, I understand the fundamental role this organization plays in defending democracies and supporting freedom.
Congressman Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio, on the House floor. Associated Press has this story. Turkey can still freeze Sweden and Finland's membership in NATO unless the two countries take steps that meet Ankara's security demands, the Turkish president said Monday. The article goes on. Last month, Turkey lifted its objection to Sweden and Finland joining the alliance, but warned that it would block the process if they failed to extradite suspects with links to outlawed Kurdish groups or the network of an exiled cleric accused of orchestrating a failed coup in 2016. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has caused a worldwide concern about food security since Ukraine is or was such a large exporter of grain. Today, USAID Administrator Samantha Power discussing food security at CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Meredith Lee, food and ag reporter for Politico, tweets, USAID head Samantha Power announces U.S. will send $1.2 billion in funding, including food aid, to Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia as drought plus war in Ukraine worsens wide-scale starvation. U.S. lawmakers have criticized USAID's delayed rollout of emergency aid Congress approved earlier this year. Here is Samantha Power.
Today, I am announcing here a surge of nearly $1.2 billion in funding that will be dispatched to meet the immediate needs faced by the people of Somalia, Kenya, and Ethiopia. This is on top of the more than $507 million we've already given to the Horn response. Later this week, I'll be traveling to the region to see up close how we can better help those weathering this historic crisis. Some of this assistance is going to take the form of food aid, staples like sorghum and split peas, and enriched cooking oil that can help sustain those who lack access to food. But as the global community has long realized, hunger cannot be fought with food alone. Even in very difficult situations, markets that sell food still function. Immediate cash assistance can be faster and more effective at staving off hunger, while also boosting local economies that need all the support that they can get. Some countries already have social safety nets in place that can quickly send money to people's mobile phones. Here, too, we are supporting efforts to quickly get cash into people's hands. We also know that in severe food crises, more people die from disease than hunger. They become so weak from a lack of food that their immune systems can't fight off diseases like pneumonia, diarrhea, cholera, measles. So as part of our assistance, mobile health and nutrition teams will rapidly expand access to vaccines and treat the severely ill. And they'll also provide clean water and sanitation kits to stop deadly waterborne diseases that are more likely to spread when sources of fresh water dry up, as in droughts like the ones these countries and these communities are confronting.
Samantha Power is the head of USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, today at CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. You can find the full discussion with her and the other panel members archived at our website at cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories sent to you every day, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter, Word for Word, at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.